Vamos dar então início à nossa conferência. E a primeira palavra é naturalmente de saudação para todos vós e bem-vindos a esta iniciativa que em boa parte e graças a Deus me surpreende, porque tentamos encontrar uma sala média e depois uma sala grande seria ainda pequena. Eu nesse aspecto peço desculpa, mas também não estava muito enquadrado na adesão à nossa conferência e por ser também um dia de trabalho, etc., nada me fez supor que estaríamos aqui tantos. Mas de qualquer forma, acho que quando está por Deus e quando está bem, cabemos em todo o espaço, não há problema. Estava há pouco a dizer aqui umas jovens que já estamos a fazer o exercício da teologia do corpo. Estamos sentados, portanto, já é um bom começo. Eu queria deixar uma palavra, portanto, de saudação a todos vós, em nome da Faculdade de Teologia, que nos associamos a esta iniciativa. Aqui a nossa, vou dizer, doutora Julie, que é doutora em Teologia, porque doutora é mestra em Teologia, e, portanto, que me abordou já há uns 3 meses para realizarmos esta iniciativa conjunta. E, desde a primeira hora, aderi a ela, porque creio que é para além de ser uma iniciativa, é também uma área, uma dimensão da teologia que nós naturalmente damos o nosso apoio e que queremos também desenvolver. Creio que esta iniciativa, como vós melhor sabeis que eu, é uma primeira etapa de um percurso que se pretende mais alongado, mais alargado e que terá certamente um dos seus pontos altos no congresso que está previsto, ou no simpósio, que será já o 4º, que está previsto para o mês de junho de 2013, em Fátima. E esta iniciativa tinha também como objetivo fazer um primeiro contacto, estabelecer uma primeira relação com a Faculdade de Teologia, de que nós damos a nossa contribuição e o nosso apoio. E por isso, aqui em nome da Faculdade, vos recebo e sou desta iniciativa e espero, mesmo nestas circunstâncias, espero que todos se sintam bem e que seja proveitosa. Vou deixar a palavra à Julie, que ela fará a apresentação então do Peter. Thank you for your visit.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I want to stay here with us.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you.
Julie.
Então, muito boa tarde. Obrigada por terem vindo. Tem muita gente, mas é bom sinal. Quer dizer que vai ser uma boa conferência. Queremos agradecer em primeiro lugar ao professor João Lourenço, o diretor da Faculdade de Teologia, por ter aceito esta iniciativa, por ter apoiado e também pela divulgação, que teve muito sucesso. Queremos agradecer também ao professor Peter Colosi por ter vindo tão longe. Ele vem da costa leste dos Estados Unidos, do estado de Pennsylvania. Vou apresentar, só assim resumidamente, um pouco do currículo dele. Ele dá aulas de Filosofia e de Teologia Moral no Seminário São Carlos Borromeo, que é em Pennsylvania. Formou-se em Matemática e depois em Filosofia nos Estados Unidos e fez doutoramento na Academia Internacional de Filosofia no Principado de Liechenstein em 2002. Especializou-se em Fenomenologia, que é um ramo de Filosofia que também João Paulo II estudou e que influenciou muito o pensamento e a obra de João Paulo II. Foi professor durante 8 anos na Universidade Franciscana de Steubenville, que fica no estado de Ohio, mas que tem um polo em Göttingen, na Áustria, que foi onde o professor Peter Colosi deu aulas durante 8 anos, em Áustria. Foi o principal organizador do primeiro Simpósio Internacional de Teologia do Corpo, em Göttingen, Áustria, em 2007, e ajudou nos seguintes também em Wynnewood, na Irlanda, em 2009, e em Londres, em 2011. O 4º Simpósio de Teologia do Corpo, como já referiu o professor João Lourenço, será em Fátima de 13 a 16 de julho de 2013. Junho, desculpa, de 13 a 16 de junho de 2013, e também é o professor Peter Colosi que está a ajudar na organização deste congresso, deste simpósio. O professor Peter Colosi investiga, escreve, faz conferências sobre uma variedade de assuntos ligados à filosofia e à doutrina moral da Igreja, nomeadamente a teologia do corpo, também o personalismo cristão, questões bioéticas, história e espiritualidade franciscana. É um prazer imenso tê-lo aqui hoje. Depois da conferência haverá um tempo para perguntas e respostas e também não haverá tradução, portanto o congresso será em inglês. Portanto, se alguém tiver mesmo muita dificuldade, sugerimos que peça, assim, pode até pôr a mão no ar, pode sentar perto de alguém que possa traduzir. Eu, por exemplo, há outras pessoas que podem traduzir. Se não, sim. Também pode traduzir.
But he would have to move over there.
Ok, exato.
Just do English.
Está bem?
Just do.
Podes
Okay, thank you.
fazer uma espécie de... Se houver problemas, ao fim esclarece as
Está bem.
perguntas.
Ok? Então, passo a palavra ao professor
Thank you.
Peter Colosi.
Okay. Thank you. I have to speak in English. I'm sorry, I don't know Portuguese. Can you hear me? Louder. Okay, I have to speak in English. I'm sorry, I don't know Portuguese. I'll speak louder. And I thought perhaps that we could begin together by praying a Hail Mary. So I know the first few words in Portuguese, and then you can finish it. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, Amen. No, say it. Ave Maria, cheia de gracia.
Bendita sois vós entre as mulheres, e bendito é o fruto do vosso ventre, Jesus. Santa Maria, Mãe de Deus, rogai por nós, pecadores, agora e na hora da nossa morte. Amém.
Thank you. So tonight's lecture is about theology of the body. Theology of the body, as was said. And the reason I'm here this week also, which was already stated, is that... Can you hear me? Louder. Okay. Maybe I should hold this. Is this better? Okay. All right. So the reason I am here is because we had the first 3 congresses, the symposia. They happen once every other year. And the Portuguese people faithfully come to all of them. And they asked if we could have it here in Fatima, which is perfect because Our Lady of Fatima was very dear to both Pope Paul VI and to Pope John Paul II. Maybe you know that when Pope John Paul II was shot in 1981, it was May 13th, the feast of Our Lady of Fatima. And on that day, when he was shot, he was going to deliver a lecture about theology of the body. And he was also going to announce the Institutes for Marriage and the Family. But he was shot. And he lived, he says, because of Our Lady of Fatima. And now, since he lived, we have both the Institutes for Marriage and the Family, and we have the book, Theology of the Body. This is the book. It's a big book, thick book. And I thought maybe, because I don't know how many of you know the text, I should say a little bit just about the history of it. It was written by Pope John Paul II before he became Pope, but he never published it as a book. And so, after he became Pope, he took small sections of it and delivered them in 20-minute segments over a period of 4 years. 4 years. And they were all published together in one book, and it's called Theology of the Body. And the book is about what it means to be a human being, with an emphasis on the topic of marriage, family, and human sexuality, according to Catholic teaching. Now, many people know what the basic teachings of the Church are about those topics. For example, marriage is between a man and a woman, and contraception is not allowed. And sexual activity should happen only after marriage. Everybody knows the Church says those things. Okay, everybody knows that. And But it's one thing to know what these things are, the prohibitions or what's allowed, but it's a totally separate thing to understand why the church teaches those things. And John Paul II noticed that there was a need to have people understand why. Because it's not good, obedience is a virtue. It's good to obey. But, but it's better to obey because you understand the truth and goodness of what you are obeying. And that is the reason why John Paul II wrote Theology of the Body, to explain the reasons to people that they could understand. Now, John Paul II, as I think was stated, he was a philosopher. So this book is very difficult to read. Very difficult to read. It's full of philosophical and theological and philological terms and concepts. And so it's important to be able to break it down so that people can understand it. And that is why we're having the symposia. So tonight, I'll give a few basic thoughts from the book. Hopefully make you think some ideas that he thought. And I'll connect it to some of the moral questions at the end. And then you can ask me anything you want. But I would also, if you're really interested in the topic, encourage you to mark your calendar now for next year. And try to read the text. And then come to the symposia next year. And you'll hear from many speakers on all the rich topics that are covered in the book. So another important point to make at the beginning is when John Paul II was a young priest, he spent much time with young couples. Couples who were dating, couples who were engaged, couples who had just been married. He would take them on camping trips, listen to all of their problems, because some people ask the question, how can the Pope, who's an old man and was never married, talk about human sexuality? But he has an answer to that. He spent so much time absorbing the problems and thoughts of young couples and helping them with their problems that, in that sense, he actually knows more than just one couple who only know each other, because he heard from so many couples all the problems, and he developed a rich understanding of what they needed to hear. And so out of that rich experience, plus all of his studies, he was able to write some very profound... And by the way, his first book, Love and Responsibility, before this he wrote one called Love and Responsibility. He has a chapter in there on sexual relations between men and women, which is so sort of accurate about also tenderness and how they should relate to each other in the sexual act, that a rumor started that he must have been married once. So, but it wasn't true. But that's a very interesting chapter to read. So you can see this was a major topic on his heart. And I should tell you too, you probably already know, that the encyclical from the year 1968 of Pope Paul VI called Humanae Vitae is a very little short booklet. Very little short booklet. And that booklet also is about the love between man and woman and procreation. It's actually very beautiful. Most people just know that Humanae Vitae, that time in the 60s, contraception was made very inexpensive and easily accessible. And the Catholics wanted to know, can we use this? But all the way since the time of St. Augustine and even before, the Church has taught that the answer is no. And Pope Paul VI explained that again in Humanae Vitae, but it's short. And then you know what happened. Many people disobeyed that. And John Paul, instead of angry at people who disobeyed, he wrote an explanation to help people understand how good Humanae Vitae is for happiness and for a couple to be happy. Be happy. Okay? So, now, what I'll do, because we can't cover all this tonight, three sort of ideas. First thing I'll cover is how the book opens. What happens at the beginning of the book. Then I'll talk about the body-soul unity, body-spiritual unity that we are. And then, if there's time, I'll talk about the idea of shame, vergogna, which is a very beautiful topic in the text. A very beautiful topic in the text. It's not what you think about shame. It's okay. So how does the book open? It's almost like a play. It opens up with Matthew 19 from the Gospels. Jesus is talking with the Pharisees, and the Pharisees, they say to Jesus, we want to divorce our wives and marry someone else. And Moses let us do this, so you should let us. I'm paraphrasing. And Jesus says to the Pharisees, Moses let you do that because of the hardness of your hearts. But, Jesus said, in the beginning, it was not like that in the beginning. And where is the beginning? It's in the book of Genesis. And you remember, in the book of Genesis, Adam and Eve are created, and they are naked, and they feel no vergogna. So, there's a time, and they didn't commit any sins. So there's a time called the original innocence before the fall. Then there's a second time called the fall, when they sin, they eat the apple. And then there's a third time period called the redemption. And the Pope, his answer to the Pharisees, which might sound very surprising to you, is that I'm going to paraphrase. Pope says that Jesus' answer to the Pharisees means that even though there's been a fall now, we still have in our heart an echo of the original innocence before the fall, because we are human. So, sin, it's part of Catholic teaching, it didn't completely destroy us. It just took away what are called the preternatural gifts. So we get sick now, we die, and we have concupiscencia. It's a temptation, but it's not a sin. But we still have the truth in our hearts. We still can know the natural law. And Jesus' answer to the Pharisees is saying, you can't use the fall as an excuse to sin because you know the truth. There is an echo from the original innocence in your heart that you can find there and live according to. You can find there and live according to it. Okay, so now that's a little bit of how the book opens. And then the Pope is explaining about the body-soul unity. So maybe I'll explain that now. So in the book, he uses the word anthropology. And in the context of theology of the body and philosophy, anthropology just means, what does it mean to be a human? And now I'm going to follow this sheet a little bit, some of the things on this piece of paper here. So to begin with, we can talk about what is a mystery. What is a mystery? So a mystery, the fact that we are spiritual and physical is a mystery. It's a mystery. Now, a mystery, you know who Sherlock Holmes is? Or Agatha Christie? Those are mysteries. Those are mysteries. But those mysteries are mysteries which, after you read the book, you solve them. There's no more mystery because you know who committed the crime. But there are some mysteries in the universe which, because we're humans, we have puny little intellects, we can't understand them fully. We can't exhaust them. And one of those, for example, is the Holy Trinity. We can know more and more and more about God, but the more we know, the more there is to know about God. We can't know Him all. Another mystery is actually the male-female difference. We can't fully understand that, but we can know a lot of things about it. And it's beautiful that that's a mystery, that that's an infinite mystery. And another mystery, the one I want to talk about now, is the mystery that we human beings are spiritual and bodily together. You know, this wall, it's only physical. And an angel is only spiritual. We are a little bit strange because we're both. We're both. And so we can talk about the world out there, the stars and the trees and even the other people, but also inside you, there is a whole world. Right now, for example, you are thinking thoughts. I'm thinking thoughts. I'm putting my thoughts into words, and you're having now the thoughts that I'm having. And then you were thinking about them. Maybe you're thinking he's crazy, or maybe, or maybe you like what. But this is an utterly amazing thing that within each one of us there is a whole world, almost as large as the world out there, maybe even larger, of our thoughts, our decisions, and our feelings. And so, in the context of tonight's talk, when I use the word soul or spiritual, I just mean that inner, immaterial reality that you are experiencing right now. As you sit and you can't, if you have a thought, you can't measure it with a tape measure or take it out and bounce it on the ground because it's not physical. But this immaterial world within you is real. It's more real. Love is immaterial, but it's more real than wood. It's more important. So that's just something to marvel at, that we are both of those. And philosophers have been wondering for a long time how it is that a physical being can have an inner life like that. Okay, so now that's the first 3 points there. Now the numbers 4, 5, and 6 I'll talk about now for a minute. Here, John Paul, in Theology of the Body, he begins talking about this relationship between the body and the soul by saying, first of all, that you are your body. You are your body. Now, this idea that you are your body is not meant in the way materialists mean it. So, for example, in the world of bioethics, very sadly now in the world of bioethics, most people teach that you are only your body. You are only your body. And so they allow for euthanasia or abortion because they think if you're not awake, you don't have a soul. Now, John Paul II, when he says you are your body, he doesn't mean to be a materialist, like they say you are. You can't do that because he's the Pope. You can't not believe in the soul. So the question then is, what does he mean by saying you are your body? And what he means is that he's trying to get a sentence to express a mystery which is barely expressible in language. And the mystery is the closeness of our bodies and our souls. They're so close, and I'm going to give examples to explain that closeness, that he wants to say you are your body to make sure you don't think your body and soul are separate, which a lot of people today do. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So first, when he says you are your body, he's trying to express a mystery, which is hard to talk about in words. That is the intimacy of the relation between our soul and body. Okay. The second, number 5 on the sheet, the invisible determines you more than the visible. This is a very simple idea, and it just means that every one of us is going to become a certain type of person, either a friendly, kind, loving person, or a mean, rude, unkind person. And the answer to the question, how do you become one of those, has to do with your spiritual life, with your thoughts, your decisions, and your feelings, much more than it has to do with your hair color or your height. The invisible, the immaterial inner life that I was talking about before is what determines the most important dimension of a person, the spiritual. Okay? So that's what he means when he says the invisible. And you know there are these Bible verses where Jesus says that too, like what goes into a man's mouth does not defile him, but what comes from his heart defiles him. So that's what he means there. The third, number 6 on the sheet, the body expresses the person. Now here it's a very beautiful, amazing statement. And here you could understand this by saying, okay, we have a bodily spiritual unity, and my inner life is very rich. And there's a question, how do you share your inner life with other people? How? And your inner immaterial life. And the answer to that is because of and through your body. Primarily, it's our bodies that reveal our souls. That's how we, like right now, my soul is having thoughts, but I'm using my teeth and my tongue to get them out there. So that's just one example. I'll give more in a minute. So that's what it means. The body expresses the person. The body reveals the soul. The body is an image of, you know, the ancient Hebrews, in the Old Testament, we have a scripture scholar here, they did, in the Old Testament, they didn't talk about the body and the soul. They said that the body is the physical manifestation of the soul, like two sides of the same reality. And that is what John Paul is trying to talk about. Okay, so now on the sheet, we can move to numbers 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And we'll see how many of those I cover. But these numbers 7 through 11 are meant to help you like feel, which is what one of the things that phenomenology, a type of philosophy that John Paul studied, was sort of meditating experientially on human experience in order to become more aware of reality. Okay? So the reality that we're talking about now is the bodily spiritual unity that we are. And now I want to meditate with you. We are going to do phenomenology together right now. All right. So the first one is sense perception. And I already talked about sense perception. Right now we're using the sense of hearing, the sense of hearing. And I'm talking because I'm having thoughts. And your eardrums are vibrating. And then something amazing is happening, which if there was a cat or a dog here, would not be happening. The cat's ears would be vibrating, but the cat would not be receiving in his soul the meaning of my words, which you are receiving the meaning. We hear things all the time, but we never take the time to marvel at how utterly mysterious it is that we're transcending to each other right now spiritually because of eardrums and teeth. There's a connection there that we can't fully grasp, but we know that it happens because it's happening. Okay, so that's one. A second, the immediate presence of the person in the body, number 8. The immediate presence of the person in the body. Another way to try to get us to experience the closeness of our bodies and our souls. If someone who loves you, like say your father, pats you on the back because you did well in sports, that pat on the back expresses immediately his pride. You feel his pride immediately. Try to remember something like that. It doesn't happen where someone pats you on the back and then you say, oh yes, I saw on television once that someone was proud of someone and they patted them on the back, and so therefore I conclude this person must be proud of. It's not a deduction. Isn't it immediate? If someone gives you a warm hug, there's an immediate awareness, it's hard to find words for, of their consolation to you, which you don't deduce to. It happens, it's like what the ancient Hebrews said. The body becomes consoling because the spiritual dimension of the person is right in the body. Okay. Or if take a negative, if someone slaps you in the face, hopefully they don't do that. But if they do that, then you don't say, oh, that hand must not like that cheek. No. You have an immediate sense of this person's not liking you, which is a spiritual thing. So, but hopefully you don't have that. All right. The third one is our upright posture. Our upright posture. Here, many thinkers, many philosophers have talked about the fact that we have a rational nature. So we can think, like you're thinking right now. We can make decisions with our will, and that's the moral life. So we become morally good by deciding to do this or that act. Like if we decide to tell lies all the time, then we become a certain kind of person, like a dishonest person. And in our spiritual life, we also have feelings like joy and love and sorrow. And these are things that persons experience, but not animals. And this fact that we can meaningfully relate to the world with our intellect, our will, and our feelings makes people have dignity, worth. And many thinkers have said that the upright posture of a person, different from the animals that are crawling on the ground and their snouts are further ahead than their eyes, we have, our dignity is expressed in our very posture because we're open to the whole world. Okay? So our very posture expresses this rational nature that we have. Okay, so, you know, in some cases like this animal rights movement, I don't know if you, did any of you see the movie King Kong? Peter Jackson's King Kong? Well, in that movie, there's two scenes in the movie where King Kong is looking at a sunset. He's looking at a sunset. And they make him be moved like we would be at the beauty of a sunset. And the girl there says, oh, beauty, like he can really grasp it. And now he can't in real life be moved by beauty, although animals do have some analogous rationality. But the thing is, even the people who made that movie, let's say they were animal rights movement people, they made, what happens in the mind of the movie goer when he sees King Kong feel beauty? The worth of King Kong goes up, right? You're like, you love him more, and this proves that humanity knows that having a rational nature is a source of dignity, a source of worth, which, by the way, since we're going to talk about the moral questions at the end, this dignity that we have means that people shouldn't treat you in certain ways. So the worth of a person issues moral claims. Like, to make a very funny example, if I'm walking down the road kicking a rock along, and then a person comes down the sidewalk, I suddenly realize, if I'm normal, that I can kick the rock, but I can't kick the person. And that causes a question. Why? Why? And the reason is because there's worth to a person. There's preciousness to a person which makes them be an end, which makes them to be the kind of being to which the only proper response is love. Love. And there are many opposites to love. The most obvious opposite to love is hatred. But another opposite to love is to ignore or abandon somebody, which I think is what euthanasia is, an opposite to love, abandon. But another opposite to love, which John Paul talks about a lot, is using another person as an object. Using a person as an object. And the dignity of a person means that you should never use a person as an object because it's a violation of their worth. Okay. So, and our rational nature is one of the reasons for that. Okay, the number 10. This one is very amazing. Human expression. Human expression. This is number 10, is another way to show the closeness of the body-soul unity that we are. John Paul II, he said once about Mother Teresa of Calcutta that he understood the meaning of Mother Teresa in her eyes. He understood the meaning of Mother Teresa in her eyes. And many people who met her, I never met her, they felt her meaning in her little posture, the humility and the charity that was exuding from her body. Or I have a professor friend of mine who tells a story, I think it was in Austria, his grandfather had Alzheimer's, dementia. And back during World War II, he saw a picture of Adolf Hitler. And he didn't know who it was because he had dementia. And he had been staring at this picture for a while, and suddenly he just blurted out, "A vulgar visage, ugly face." And he didn't know who it was. Now, why am I telling you the story about feeling Mother Teresa's joy in her eyes, or that man experiencing Hitler's vices in a picture? Why? Because it is utterly amazing that the posture of somebody, the tone of voice of somebody, the look in their eyes, those things get to be that way because of what we think, feel, and decide. Human expression is one of the most amazing things on the planet. That like rudeness can be in a face. It doesn't make sense, but it's true. The way a person's eyes are, the way their posture is, the way their smile is because of their spiritual inner life. So it gets impressed on your body. So someone who sees Mother Teresa and doesn't know her, they're immediately overwhelmed by her love because it's immediately present in her body. And you probably know if you meet somebody who's very joyful, even if you don't know them, you experience joy, which is spiritual, in their face. Even though the soul is joyful, the face is joyful too, somehow. So that's the closeness. And now this idea that the soul forms the body by means of human expression makes possible something else which is utterly amazing, a body-soul unity, and that is empathy. And empathy is the ability that we have to feel the feelings of other people. To feel the feelings of other people. It doesn't mean, empathy is not like you tell me something that happened to you, and then I say, oh yes, that happened to me 3 years ago, and I felt like this, which is like you felt. Why is that not empathy? Because who are you thinking about? Yourself, right. So, but empathy is when, the first step of empathy is to correctly grasp the facial expression of another person. And then you, in a very mysterious way, feel their feelings. An example of this could be, let's say you have a close friend who's very depressed, and you don't know it because the person is hiding their depression. But you know them well. Sometimes all it could take in the conversation is a little quiver of their lip, and you suddenly are rushed with the awareness, they're depressed, they're sad. How is it that a quiver in the lip can make you feel their feeling of depression? But it happens. So this is how amazingly close God has built our body and soul unity. The last one, and by the way, empathy, it doesn't mean that all of everybody's feelings are immediately present in their face. So there are some levels of our intimacy which we can only share with others by talking and so forth. And it doesn't mean also that we can't trick people. We can trick people. But when you do feel the feelings of another, it happens because of this immediate presence of the spiritual and bodily union that we are. Okay, the last one, the uniqueness of each person. Singularidad of each person is here. In order to understand the uniqueness of each person, you have to ask yourself, you have to think about somebody you love, someone you love very dearly. Ponder their face. Right now you could think about their face. And I often ask the students, why, if you had to tell me why you love this person who you love, why? Then I sometimes say that to the students, and they say, I think it's the way they walk or the way they laugh. And obviously a walk or a laugh is not, you can love a walk or a laugh, but it's not strictly speaking what you love. You love the person who is walking and laughing, and what's striking is, in some mysterious way, the spiritual, utterly unique person who this is gets expressed in their laugh or their walk. Maybe that's why everybody's laugh is unique. And so this uniqueness of a person is known to you when you love somebody. This utter uniqueness of a person is known to you when you love a person. You can see the uniqueness of another when you love them. And what's amazing is it gets expressed in their body also. It gets expressed in their body also. Okay, so now maybe I could talk a little bit about shame, vergogna, and connect it with what I said, and then draw some moral conclusions. So in both of these books, Theology of the Body and in Love and Responsibility, the Pope has very deep meditations on the idea of shame. Now I said at the beginning that shame, normally what we think of shame is you feel shame when you do something bad or silly. That's when you feel shame. And that is a good definition of shame. And it's good. By the way, the shame of the negative is a good thing. It's a good thing. Because if you didn't feel shame, then you would be shameless. Someone who feels no shame is a person who can do immoral actions and not care and never change. So it means your conscience is dead if you feel no shame. So even though we don't like shame, it's good. All right? so because it protects you. And John Paul, in the realm of human sexuality, he divides it between men and women. And he says women often will feel shame if they think a man is approaching them as an object. The woman will start to feel shame. And then he says this leads to modesty. Then the woman will maybe cover a little bit. to protect herself from being reduced to an object. Men, he said, now this could be flipped for men and women too, but men, he says, feel shame, they should feel shame when they are noticing themselves starting to think about a woman as an object, a sex object. They should feel shame. And then, now the reason, in the realm of sexuality, the reason for this shame of the negative is to inspire love. It protects you from thinking of the person as an object, and it pushes you towards meeting the person as a person. So the goal of shame, according to Wojtyła, Wojtyła is his name before he became Pope, is love, is love, is love. Okay? Now, here's something very surprising that you might never have thought of before, this shame of the positive, or the intimate. First of all, maybe a funny example. What if you were coming to the talk tonight with one of your friends, and you decided for the first time to tell your friend some intimate secret that you never told your friend before? Now it's going to be something that's good, not some sin you committed, but some intimate personal thing that's good. You tell your friend, okay? Now let's say during the question and answer period, your friend raises their hand and I say, yes, what? And they stand up and say, I have an announcement to make. And they tell everybody what you told them. In that moment you would feel what? Shame. You would feel shame. Now now some people always say anger. I would feel anger, but you would feel anger. Except logically, first you feel shame, and that's why you feel anger. So now why? Here's a very interesting question that the Pope wrote about. It's stunning. Why do you feel shame? Because the person did not tell something bad that you did. They told something intimate. And actually, maybe we should make a definition, a one-sentence definition of the word intimate. Something of your soul, your spiritual life, and your bodily life, which is intimate, is something which, when revealed to another person, tends to reveal your very being to the person. That's what something which is intimate is. If you share something intimate with another, you end up revealing your soul, as it were, to them. So, the reason for shame over intimate things is when you reveal something intimate to a person who cannot cherish you or the intimate thing. And that is people who don't know and love you. Okay? So this shame is even more profound in the realm of human sexuality than the first one. Because what Wojtyła says there is that when two people are beginning to meet each other, let's say, and they're thinking about having a relationship that would tend towards marriage, they feel both kinds of shame at the beginning. Because they want to know that this person loves them before they share something intimate with them. And so both types of shame, shame of the negative and shame of the intimate, have as their goal love. To get the people to focus on the other, like to look at their face or their eyes and get to know the person. Now, you see the last part there, he says, shame is absorbed by love. Shame is absorbed by love, number 18. And here, this is very striking. In a lot of these talks about human sexuality, when people go around giving talks about chastity and they try to encourage young people to wait until marriage before they have sex, oftentimes there's a question that comes at that point where they say, well, okay, I agree with you that just promiscuous having sexual relations with all random people, okay, it's bad. But what if you're in love, they say. What if you're in love? Now that question, what if you're in love, John Paul II takes it very seriously. Because it's coming from a true experience. When the two people are falling in love and getting closer and closer to eventually being married, and if they're truly falling in love, getting to know each other as a person and so forth, that positive shame gets absorbed by the love because they love each other. You could put it in a funny way and say, the shame did its job correctly. It helped them to get to see each other. Now, the thing is, when that happens, the desire for intimacy grows. And John Paul II is saying that is good. That's how it's supposed to happen. But then he says, however, the answer to the what if we're in love is still no. And so he says this experience of growing in intimacy makes the couple have a higher challenge. It raises the bar. A positive way to put that would be, it gives them an opportunity to really show each other that they love each other. By waiting, Now that could be different for different couples. Some of them might never be able to be in the same room together. Others could spend time together, but it depends on personalities and so forth. But in each case, you have to figure that out and let the intimacy. So John Paul would never say, "Oh yeah, quash that intimacy." He wouldn't say that. He would say, "This is what's supposed to happen, but now that you're closer to marriage, you have a greater challenge to love the other person." And the reason is because only with your will, when you get married, can you confirm with a decision that you're making a whole gift to yourself. And maybe here we can explain why it is. Why is it? Why does the church teach that you should not have sex before marriage? Some of the things that I said today should already make that clear. Once you experience the closeness of your body-soul unity, and you realize that something like a hug is a way to share your soul with another person, then it should be sort of obvious that sexual relations is a profound way to share your whole being with another person. And in fact, you can make this clear in some very simple, practical ways. Like, think about the different types of love. Friendship love and sibling, brother-sister love. Well, friendship love and sibling love, you can have one friend, another friend, and as long as you have to, whatever, jealousies and all that get in the way. But in general, the more friends you have, the more you can have, and they can become friends with each other and it can grow. Or the more siblings you have, it grows more and more. But now, there's another type of love called spousal love, where if the man said, "Yes, I love you," and also her, and her, and her, and her, well, that kills that love. So there's one kind of love, even though they all have a lot in common, there's one kind of love, spousal love, which by nature calls for completeness and exclusivity. Completeness and exclusivity. And that is spousal love. And this is one reason why you should wait until marriage, because of this completeness idea. You are able, it's a very mysterious thing, but God made it so that you are able to give yourself completely to your spouse in a very intimate way through the sexual act in marriage. And that needs to be confirmed with your will, for it not to be dishonest. Because your body would be saying, "I give my whole self to you," but you haven't, because you didn't get married. Okay. I thought I would say, maybe I'll say one more thing. I don't know how much longer I should talk.
We have half an hour maybe, but
to talk?
leave some time for
Wow.
questions.
Oh, okay. A half hour for the whole. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Then maybe I'll say one thing, and then hopefully we can have some question and answers. One more thing. It's number 12 and 13. Contraception and natural family planning and fertility, fertilidad. And I know these topics are sort of, people skirt around them, they don't want to talk about them. But I think it's important to talk about them for many reasons. A lot of reasons, world event reasons, political reasons. Now you may have heard in my country, we have the government is trying to force all the Catholic hospitals and Catholic universities to pay for contraception, sterilization, and abortion, pills that cause abortion. Later, they will want them to pay for abortions too. Now, in America right now, we still have religious freedom, and these universities can exclude that from their health insurance, okay? Because those things aren't good. Now, everybody knows, as I said at the beginning of the talk, what the church thinks about abortion, sterilization, and contraception. No, no, no. But it's important to understand why. Why? Now, I'm going to just give you one reason from what I said tonight for you to ponder. There's many ways to explain it. And if you want to talk about other ways in the question and answer, we can talk about other arguments and explanations. But in this idea that we are a spiritual bodily unity, this includes our fertility. This includes our fertility. Now, there's a very interesting difference between men and women on fertility. And that is, women have their cycle, and we don't have that cycle, the monthly cycle. Okay, I know it's a little personal topic, but but the thing is, you know, if and maybe a woman should give this part of the talk, but in these numbers 7 through 11, I gave you 5 ways to show the closeness of our body-soul unity. But women, they experience their fertility more palpably than we do. We don't really experience our fertility, I mean, in the way that you do. You understand me, good. That experience that women have of their monthly cycle makes them realize another way in this list that we are spiritual bodily unities, because it does affect their emotional life and their spiritual life and their physical life in ways that they experience very regularly and very palpably. Now, another thing that's important to say about fertility is it is a state of health. Health. So if you go to medical school now, they teach that fertility is a disease. But it's not. It's a state of health. So is pregnancy, by the way. Those are states of health. Those are ways in which our bodies were made to function. So to think of, it's a contradiction to think of the pill as healthcare, because it's causing a disease. Okay? But, back to my point. If a man who wants to marry a woman, now that you understand this closeness of your body-soul unity, if he says to the woman, if he says, you know, I love you and I want to know everything about you, including your cycle and everything else, and that cycle, I want us to live our marriage in tune with that. If a woman hears those words from the man, it seems to me that very deep in her soul, she's going to feel affirmed in her personhood because of this body-soul unity that she is. He's going to be affirming that very palpable dimension of her experience. Now, if another man says to his fiancée something like, you know, your fertility is annoying me, could we suppress it? And even if he doesn't say that, just using contraception is saying that. Then at some level of her being, she's going to feel the opposite of affirmation. She's going to feel certain rejection of her as a body-soul unity. That's sort of a phenomenological way to explain it. There are many other ways to explain this, but you know, I gave this talk once to a group of engaged couples, and after I said that thing about fertility, one of the men went right to the guy in charge of the thing and asked him how he could learn about natural family planning. Because he understood, once he understood what I just said, he realized the power that knowledge has to help him love his wife in her whole being. So he actually it's a challenge. You know, it's easy to just pop a pill, but it's a challenge. But it's not difficult. You know, in the old days, they thought that the cycle was 28 days for every woman. That was called the rhythm method. now they have it very scientifically ways to do it, which is very accurate and so forth. So I'm thinking, I mean, I have more to say, but maybe that's enough. And you can ask me some questions. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Vamos já passar às perguntas, mas antes disso, esqueci-me de dizer que nesta folha, com licença, onde estão os pontos, tem uma parte destacável, que podem começar já a preencher com o nome e com outros dados, se quiserem receber não só esta conferência, o texto, e está a ser filmada também, mas notícias sobre o simpósio em Fátima para o ano. Era só para começarem já a preencher durante as perguntas.
You think I should say?
Okay.
Okay. If you have
perguntas em português. Agradecemos ao professor Peter Colosi a conferência e creio que o melhor é, de facto, fazer as perguntas em português e a Julie facilmente traduz. E assim estamos mais à vontade, não é? E portanto tem a palavra.
Or in English.
Ok, sim. Traduz aqui para todos. Quem abre o debate. Ok.
Como é que a teologia do corpo está a ser recebida na Igreja e sobretudo nas faculdades de teologia? Já começa a ser relacionada?
Em Portugal ou mundialmente?
Pelo menos não.
Okay. How is theology of the body being received in the church and in the theology departments of universities, in Portugal and also in other places?
I wonder if I should answer some of these in Spanish. Well, is that a good idea?
Maybe.
¿Me entienden mejor cuando hablo en español? No. Okay. I'll stay speaking in English.
That's what also in Spanish.
Pero sí me entienden.
Why Canadian?
What's that?
Speak also
No,
in
they
Spanish.
want me to speak in English, I think. Okay, I would say that he said, you said that already. First of all, there's a difference between America and Europe. And by the way, maybe she mentioned, I lived in Europe for 14 years, 14 años, where they speak German. And so I know a little bit the difference between America and Europe. And the first answer to the question is that in America, theology of the body is known much more. So there is sort of a movement, and there are many of what are called popular speakers who go around giving talks based on the text. And there are even now theology of the body courses for teenagers and even little children where they don't talk about sex, but they talk about the dignity of the person and so forth, rooted in the text. So one answer is that there's a popular movement in a certain circle of Catholics in America where it's known. And I don't find that so much in Europe. So that's one answer. A second answer would be during the time when John Paul was actually delivering those speeches, like in late 70s and early 80s, the media reacted in various ways. So every time he gave a talk, it would be published in L'Osservatore Romano in many languages. And you could say that, first of all, and he gave the talks, you know, they're on Wednesdays. If you go to Rome, even now, on Wednesday, at 10:30 in the morning, you go to San Pietro, and he comes out there and gives a talk. Benedict does too. You can see the Pope give a talk. And people were very surprised then that a Pope was talking about human sexuality in public. That was surprising. And so many people were curious, but they liked it because it was so positive. Now, sometimes the media reacted you might remember, or you might know about the story where one time the Pope was giving the audience where he talked about adultery in the heart. Remember, Jesus says, you can commit adultery without physically committing adultery by just thinking about women lustfully, or women about men. And then he said, it is possible for married couples, he said this in one of his audiences, it is possible for married couples to commit adultery in the heart. And the news media in the whole world went crazy, and they said, he's crazy. But what he meant was that even if you're married, it is still possible to reduce your spouse to a sex object and not a person. So even married people have to have the task of raising human sexuality to the level of person. All right? So now in universities, in some universities in America, we have a handful of a small number of Catholic universities who are openly in favor of the magisterium of the church. There's maybe there's 10 now. So those ones, they use this text and they teach about it. But as you maybe see in the news now, like Georgetown University and so forth, most of the universities, Catholic universities, don't use it because their departments are still full of many professors who are dissenting from Catholic teaching. But here's a final answer, and then we'll take another question. Why is this becoming interesting? Why? I think the answer is that there has been so much promiscuity, so much divorce, and all these things. I think maybe people are tired and they just want to know where happiness is. True love, is it possible? After all this, I think there are many people who are like, is this possible? And I think maybe that's why it's getting some interest. But there's a lot more to be known. It's not so known yet, which is why we have the symposia. Is there another?
What would we say to our friends that like two males or two females that are desperately in love and that they'd like to share their lives, their love, and
wants to get me in trouble. Okay, that's a very difficult question. And first thing I would say is that this text does have sources in it to help us answer that question. Okay? And the sources within this text that can help us answer that question have to do with the complementarity of men and women. The complementarity of men and women. Okay? Which from the beginning, like Jesus said, is the way God set things up. Now, there's a split, in the public discussion right now, there's two sides to this question. One is making marriage mean that men can marry men and women can marry. And the other is just people living this homosexual life, and how do you understand it? The answer which the church gives to the question about homosexual marriage is, the answer that the church gives is that it's wrong. But the reason why the state has an interest in defining marriage as between a man and a woman is because of children. That's the reason. So the best thing for children is to have a mother and a father who are married and love each other in the warmth of the family. And that is the best thing for children to grow virtuously and healthy. Okay? And the reason the state has an interest in that is because that makes for a healthy society. When people grow up in the family unit and have a mother and a father, and you need both to form your soul. Okay, now, with respect to the more difficult question you asked, The church, as you know, in all of her statements on this, says that people who have same-sex attraction have, of course, the same dignity as everybody else. In fact, do you know the story of Mother Teresa of Calcutta? One time, Mother Teresa of Calcutta was being asked by reporters, "What do you think about homosexuals?" And she stopped the interview and she said, "Don't call them homosexuals." She said, "Call them, in the rest of this interview, if you want to talk about that group of people, call them friends of Jesus." And then the reporters started saying homosexual, and she said, "No." And then he said, "Okay, what do you think about the friends of Jesus?" Okay, and so the church has this profound love for everybody, Now, the politically incorrect thing is that you probably know the church does teach that the same-sex attraction itself is not a sin. To freely choose to act on it, the church would say, is a sin. And how much freedom is present is another question. But the church does say that it is a sort of disorder in the psychological life of the person. And there's a number of studies that try to explain that, which we maybe don't have time to go into now. But it's difficult because the root of it, I would say, is it's a relationship to love that was perhaps missing in some way in childhood. And without explaining all the different psychological theories, it seems to me that that explains why there's this yearning for love, and that also explains why it's difficult to say no to them, because it's like they're saying no love is allowed. So maybe that's all I'll say about it. Now that would be a topic for a whole nother talk to explore, but there are some good references that explain more what I just said. Okay, any other?
Yes.
Yeah. Hi.
I'll speak in English.
Okay.
Could you address the connection related between contraception and abortion? Because most of our non-Catholic friends that are pro-life,
right,
contrary to abortion, think that contraception will solve the problem.
Right.
Or maybe a couple of years ago when the Pope said condoms are not good in Africa.
Right.
They cause the rise of this. The mentality that goes with.
Well, when the Pope said that in his other remark, and maybe another way to talk about that is to say, as I said earlier, this is really a commentary on Humanae Vitae. Hopefully, one of the things that came through in the talk I gave today is that the Pope and the Church has an understanding of human sexuality that is deeply human. They see its connect. If you read the first paragraph and the last paragraph of Humanae Vitae, they're both about happiness. They're both about happiness. The Church thinks that living in a sort of contraceptive mentality will hurt your happiness and the love between the couple. So the argument against contraception is not only that it stops procreation, but it also stops love. In fact, I have an amazing quote from John Paul II here. So you're right to point out, while I look for this quote, that it is a contradiction to think that there's not only no link between contraception and abortion, but to think that contraception is the cure for abortion is false. Maybe you're looking for something more simple. I can give two arguments for that. Why is it false that contraception is the cure for abortion? And the answer is because contraception causes abortion. Why? Why? I'll give you two reasons. There's more than just two. One of them has to do with the pill. When they first invented the pill, there were large doses of hormones in it. And these large doses of hormones in the pill caused many side effects in the women who took it. In fact, many died. In fact, they even did experiments on women in Puerto Rico. It's very sad. They used them with the different dosages to see what would happen. It's horrible, the history of the invention of the pill. Well, after they noticed the different side effects of the pill, they reduced certain levels of the hormones just to the point where the side effects would go away, but still pregnancy would not occur. Now, this is a little biology lesson now. When ovulation happens, an egg is released from the ovary and goes into the fallopian tube, and the sperm goes up through the uterus into the fallopian tube, and that is where contraception happens. And then it takes 4 to 8 days for the little conceptus, the little baby, to go back down to the uterus. And during that time it grows to a blastocyst stage, which is cells on the outside and the little body in the middle. And what happens is, when it comes back down to the uterus, because of the cycle, the wall of the uterus becomes flush with nutrients and the ability to absorb the baby into a safe place where it grows. Because they reduced, when the hormones in the pill were high, the only way the pill worked was suppressing ovulation. It stopped ovulation. But now that the hormones are low in the pill, sometimes ovulation happens. And so pregnancy happens in the fallopian tube. But the pill causes the lining of the uterus to be inhospitable to the little conceptus. And so the baby is ejected. I don't know if you understood that. But that's, so now doctors debate how much, whether it's 10% of pregnancies actually happen but can't implant because of the pill. So one answer to your question is just biology. The pill really does cause abortion. In fact, they have pills like RU46. It just maximizes what I just told you. So one reason why contraception causes abortion is because it really causes physical abortions. But the other reason is that there's a mentality that goes with contraception. And the Pope talks about it here. Maybe I won't read the passage, but he talks about this idea of spouses. The openness to life is an openness to the spouse, a complete openness to the spouse. And being closed to life also closes your soul to the spouse, like we said before about fertility. And the popes actually teach that using contraception, making a decision to block procreation, necessarily introduces selfishness into the relationship. Some degree of selfishness. Now this mentality against life, think about it logically. If you are saying, if you're thinking of a baby primarily as a problem, and you're suppressing fertility, if that's your whole way of thinking, and then suddenly a baby happens, it's just the next step on your contraceptive mentality to go to abortion. So it's a logical trajectory, you could say, from contraception to abortion. And you know, the popes, Paul VI, in Humanae Vitae, he predicted in 1968 all these things that would happen if contraception became very widespread. He said there would be marital infidelity and divorce, lowering of moral standards, because contraception, what does it say to a teenager? If an adult is saying something to a teenager when they give them contraception, they're making a point. Yes. And so but if you think back to when you were a teenager and some adult was sort of encouraging you, you're just a kid with your hormones going, it pushes you in the direction of promiscuity. And the Pope predicted that this would happen. The Pope predicted that this would happen. He also predicted men would reduce women to objects once they understood. Some of these things are very logical. Like if a man has a vasectomy, what is that going to do to his temptation level when he wants to be unfaithful to his wife? When he knows that he can't get anybody pregnant, it's going to go up. That's just logical. So those are some ideas that show that these are from the same cloth. These are from the same cloth. Okay. Any other questions? See.
não sei se foi ser individualista que usou selfish.
You used the word selfish when you talked about not having children.
Então, inclusive, não podemos ver por esse lado também o planeamento natural.
Does that mean, can we see natural family planning through that lens also, through selfishness?
Oh, yeah. Wow, that's good. She's faithful to the Pope. Now here, though, this is a very important question, though. So there's a distinction between what's called natural family planning and contraception. This is what she's asking me about. Now, the first point to make is that, as you probably know, the church is in favor of natural family planning. Couples can use natural family planning to space children. Okay. Now, I think if I understood your question, which many people ask, is it possible to use natural family planning with a contraceptive mentality? And that is possible. That is possible. But even if a couple uses natural family planning with a contraceptive mentality, so we should pick an extreme example. Like, let's say they say, we're not having any babies until we become millionaires and buy 3 yachts. So if they say that, but we're just going to use natural family planning, not contraception, that would be an example of what you're talking about. Even in that case, John Paul says in this book, that is not contraception. It is a moral problem. It's a moral problem with respect, as you said, to selfishness and generosity. But the reason it's not contraception is because the couple is not having sex and then doing something during the act with their will to block procreation. That second choice of a moral object, like the choice to use the pill or the choice to use a condom, doesn't happen even in that case. So the Pope says it's a moral question, but like philosophically speaking, it would be wrong to call it contraception because it's a different moral object. But you could call it the contraceptive mentality, which now we should say something on sort of the positive side. You know, the church teaching on the spacing of children is very generous. The church says that the beginning step is there should be generosity to having children, openness to having children, and try to have children. But do you know that there is no list that the Pope ever put out? These are the reasons you can't, not a yacht or whatever else. They never put a list. The Pope says the couple decides. The couple decides what the reasons are. Psychological, financial, education. They just have to be generous, and they have to be sort of serious reasons to wait. But there are many serious reasons, and every single couple is unique on that. So that's why there's no list. And so the church, you know, St. Paul says we've been called to freedom for freedom's sake or something. The church with this teaching does want the couple. It's beautiful that now we understand how natural family planning works. And the church, it's called responsible parenthood. And so there's a lot of freedom that you can combine. Nobody should be becoming scrupulous about whether they're sinning because they're using NFP. A spirit of generosity and then a spirit of responsibility together, and each couple decides. The Pope doesn't decide when you space. He would say, that's not my decision, that's yours. But please use NFP to decide, and then you're free. So hopefully that, good question. Oh, follow up.
And what about women that don't have a regular cycle?
Oh. Well, first of all, I will say something about that. The methods now of natural family planning can deal with that very well. And I teach, as she said at the beginning, I teach at a seminary. I teach people who will be priests. I also teach people at night who are lay people. But we have come to my class, it's called a nurse practitioner, a woman who is trained in one of these methods. It's called the Creighton model. And you could maybe look that up and read about it. And Creighton and naprotechnology. And we teach the priests about this Not because they are going to train the couples how to chart. They're not going to train the couples how to chart. But they, exactly what you just said, people have been asking priests, but they didn't know the answer. But now, there's this man named Thomas Hilgers. There's other groups that develop natural feminine, and they know somebody, right, from Spain who trains women here in Portugal in this Creighton method. And I know, because I know the nurse, and she teaches the men, and I hear her every single time she comes. And it is amazing how much they have developed ways to know exactly what's going on in irregular cycles and even ways to regulate them. And this is what's very interesting with respect to your question. This man, Dr. Hilgers, who developed this particular form of NFP, he just wanted, because the Pope says in Humanae Vitae, at the end of Humanae Vitae, Paul VI, he has, this is what I want to say to priests. This is what I want to say to lay people. This is what I want to say to bishops. And then he says, this is what I want to say to doctors. Paul VI did. And he said, I want you doctors to figure this out so that to make it easy for the faithful to live according to this. So this guy, Dr. Hilgers, when he read that, he decided to make that his life's work. And all he wanted to do was figure out the charting. And he did it. But then, as you know, now, more than almost any time in history, infertility is a big problem. There are many women who can't get pregnant. And there are lots of reasons why. And this man, Dr. Hilgers, noticed on the charts of the women what he calls biomarkers. Signs in their cycle that reveal what the underlying cause of the infertility is. And there are many causes like endometriosis, or sometimes the ovaries can be too big, sometimes it's hormonal. And then, once he noticed the different causes of infertility, he developed medical procedures to cure the infertility. And sometimes that re-regulates the cycle. And so here's another whole topic. You said contraception, but there's also in vitro fertilization, right? So now there's a whole industry of in vitro. And by the way, the pill, there are some studies that indicate the pill is one of the major causes of infertility because it's messing with your system for so long. So the infertility clinics, they don't want to know what the cause of the infertility is. They just want to force a baby. And so that's why the percentages of infertility clinics coming to live birth, it's like around 30% or lower. But this man, Dr. Hilgers, is around 70% of women who come to him because he figures out what the cause of the infertility is. Like if it's endometriosis, he goes in there and actually can remove the endometrium cells that are outside of the uterus. And then the woman can actually get pregnant because the cause is removed. So the quick answer to your question is there is an answer to that. And many doctors have worked on it. And if you look up that Creighton, or if you write an email to them and ask, we can send you that. Good question, Mark.
Oh, yeah. And then why did everyone just clap?
She said this is actually
actually challenge directly towards the director to form priests that can talk about this.
Yeah, no. See.
Once, I do catechesis for the 10th degree of the catechesis in Portugal. We prepare them to Christmas.
See.
And I don't know who will speak. Hi. I made one experience like that, because I was speaking about theology of the body in half of that time. We have 1 hour for a week. We first see the credo, and in the other half part of the class, we talk about theology of the body. You know, as I was talking about with one girl, no one ever said that to me.
Right.
Yeah. Right. That's
so now, and here we should say a positive and a negative. So first of all, you're right. And actually, when I give this talk in parishes, they always say, "How come we never hear this from the pulpit?" Someone always says that. Now, the first thing I would say, is that I have some understanding for the bishops and the priests from 1968 and on, because I don't think they knew how, none of them, even the lay people, how to deeply explain it. So Humanae Vitae was very short, it's very rich, but I think, you know, God's mercy is great, and some people maybe should have spoken more, and other people used contraception, but God can forgive everything, and that's what He wants to do the most. He wants to forgive everybody. So, and then He wants us to come back to Him. So now, I agree with you. And this is what we're trying to do at the seminary. We're trying, where I teach, and a few other seminaries in America, when the men are third theologians, they take a course called Catholic Teachings on Sexuality and Marriage. And in that class, we bring the nurse. I told you, my friend, this nurse, she comes in because she trains couples. And she trains the priests like the couples. And then I teach a lot of this stuff. And we have couples come in. Some couples, for example, who used contraception for a long time, and then they switched. They come and talk to the men. And I give the men the nurse's phone number. They know her. So when they go become a priest, and like when they do what you do, then the couples might say, "Oh, I'd be willing to try." And you say, "Oh, go call this nurse. She's very friendly and she can help you understand." So we have to sort of help each other. But you're right that there has been. You're absolutely right. There's been a big lack. You know, I write about this now. I write about. I'm writing now about this law in America, forcing the government forcing the Catholic hospitals and universities to use these things. And one of the reasons why the bishops in America are doing very well right now, because all of them, unified voice, very surprising, they all spoke against it publicly and writing. But you know, I don't know if you follow the story at all, but there's two parts to it. One is religious freedom. The First Amendment of our Constitution promotes religious freedom, that the government can never stop people from practicing their religion. And this is doing that. So the bishops are fighting the government on the point of religious freedom, but not on the point of contraception. And I think I think maybe when the bishops go on TV, they should just fight for religious freedom. But I do. And I write about this. You can read some of my articles if you want to. I'm writing, and I'm trying to be very nice and not be mean to the bishops. But I'm saying that I think now, because the whole country, this is like a reincarnation of 1968. The whole country, my country, and to the extent that it's in Europe, the news, you too, everyone's now thinking, oh, the Catholic Church thinks something about contraception. And that's how everybody thought in 1968. The whole world's like, what does the Catholic Church think about? Is this a war on women? That's what they're all talking about. And so this is what is called the proverbial teaching moment. And I think that the bishops and the priests now should try their best to understand this, and maybe just in their parishes, because that's a principle of Catholic teaching too. Face-to-face, meeting people. So maybe the bishop shouldn't go on TV and say contraception, blah, blah, blah. But we have parishes, and that's where the grassroots is. And I think that is why the bishops in America are not... I read a poll that said close to 60% of American Catholics agree with the assertion, this mandate is not threatening my religious freedom. Now that's silly, because it is. It's like, to make an analogy, if the government said, do you know who the Amish are? Yeah. The Amish? They live by themselves, they don't drive cars. If the government said, the Amish must drive cars, that's the same thing that's happening right now. And if the government, instead of picking contraception, had picked the Amish, instead of picking the Catholics, making them pay for it, they said, no, you Amish, you have to drive cars. We, of course, would join with the Amish and fight. Why? Because it's a violation of religious freedom. So that's why the bishops are fighting from religious freedom, to get the Amish and the Jews, even people who think contraception is okay. I don't know if the Amish do, but whoever, they want to join us to fight for religious freedom because they're scared they're next. But I think that the Catholics, because, as you said, there's been so much silence and people don't even know, that they can't understand that this is an attack on religious freedom, because they've accepted the false premise that you brought up, that contraception is health care and it's just abortion that's bad. But contraception is not health care. It's making you have a disease. So yes, we need, now I think everybody should try to, in a friendly but firm way, encourage the priests and give them materials to sorry, I'm talking too much. Give them materials.
Last question.
Oh, last question. Última pregunta. Oh, it's you. Oh.
Okay, it's. I think there are here many young men that are studying to be priests.
Oh.
So could you tell them something about how the theology of the body makes sense for their life, for consecrated people, and for us also?
Yeah. There's a very beautiful. So she said, oh, you heard her. But for priests, you know, it's a good point, because I made it sound like this book is only for married people. But that is not true. There's a whole section at the end of the book called Continence for the Kingdom of God. Continence for the Kingdom of God. That's a saying from Jesus. Remember when he says there's 3 types of eunuchs? And some people are born eunuchs, some people make themselves that way. But then Jesus said some people freely choose to be a eunuch, meaning their sexuality functions perfectly well, but they choose celibacy. And of course, for the Jewish people hearing that, they're like, they're crazy. Because the Jews, you know, some of them don't even believe in an afterlife, so they have to have their children to carry on. And this would be maybe too long of an answer to answer. So I'll say 2 things to the seminarians about how this text can help. One is, in answer to this question, you can understand all this to really help your couples have a happy marriage. But the other is, that section on continence for the kingdom of heaven is so beautiful. John Paul asserts in there that just like man and woman are complementary, and you can't understand each other without each other, to the same degree, celibacy and marriage are complementary. And he even asserts that marriage cannot be understood unless there are celibates. And celibacy cannot be understood unless there are married people. And remember at the beginning of the talk, I said that there's the original state, the fall, and the redeemed state. And the celibates are actually an image of the redeemed state, like how we will be in heaven. And marriage is sort of, it's a very beautiful thing. And of course, yes, there will be a special relationship between spouses in heaven because we're going to know who each other are. But in heaven, people will be living more, I mean, it's more than we can ask or imagine really, but it'll be more like the celibate state than the married state. And so the priests are an image of that now. So I think with that answer to that question, rather than giving another lecture, I will say this. I hope that you come to the symposium next summer because we're going to there's going to be so many speakers. We're going to have the text broken up. And so we'll have an entire lecture just on the part that says continence for the kingdom of God. But you can read it before then. Read it before then. That part. And it will help you. You will be enriched as a seminarian if you read that section. You'll be very enriched. Is that everything?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. She should give the talk.